Alright guys, welcome back to the shop. Today we're going to go far, far away from the intended use of really any knife that you're going to come across. And as the caption says, to know the true metal of a blade, it must be destroyed. Every bladesmith must test knives far beyond their intended use as part of the process, and I'm a firm believer in that. Every once in a while, and especially as you're developing a new heat treat or technique or blade style, etc., testing your blades to failure is going to tell you things about the steel, about the edge geometry, and the general construction of the blade that you're not otherwise going to find out. So I've got a nice little San Mai blade here. The edge geometry is great for a general use EDC blade, as you would find in something this size. And we're chopping through a galvanized 8-penny nail. I believe it's an 8-penny. Yes, we have damage. You're going to sustain damage no matter what knife you use, and that's to be expected because this knife, any knife, is not meant for this. But the type of damage that it sustains is going to tell us a little bit about the edge geometry, the heat treat. And so it did not chip out. We still have our blade steel there for the most part. And now onto some brass. And again, it's metal. It's a little bit softer than steel, but far beyond what we actually want to do to our knife. So all our edge steel appears to be there still. We're not chipping out, and that's a good sign. You're really, in the heat treat, one of the things you're doing is dancing the line between toughness and hardness, and I think this is a pretty good balance here, so I'm pretty happy with what we have here. Now, edge geometry is an important part of this too, because I could go ahead and grind this into a really heavy, obtuse, grind and chop through a nail or whatever, and see here, look, it doesn't, there's no this, the edge is perfectly fine. Well, maybe we could do something like that, but that's going to be with, it's the knife that does that isn't going to cut. And that's sort of the whole point of a knife, is to cut stuff. So, I'm using the edge geometry for a blade that cuts. So I'm reefing on here. Instead of going slow, which will get you more flex, I just bent this over, snapped it off. I honestly didn't expect it to snap off quite like that. Of course, it snapped on the opposite side of the compression, which now I can't think of what that is, but the stretching side. And snapping the blade in half tells us a little bit about the blade. The general toughness, which it did pretty good, and the grain size, the grain structure here. If you can see in the shot here, had a little difficulty getting it focused, but it's very good. Something else you'll notice there is that my welds, the San Mai welds, the mild steel cladding on the outside of the 5200 high carbon steel center, the welds came apart a little bit. And this also tells you something about your process, because when you're forge welding, whether it's a full-scale Damascus or pattern welded style billet or just a San Mai billet, you're really kind of dancing that line between high enough heat to get a good forge weld and not overheating your steel. Even if you don't severely overheat your steel, you don't want to heat it any more than you have to, because that's not helping you. So, ideally, you actually are on that line to where, 1 or 2 times out of 10, you might have a forge weld that doesn't quite, do what it's supposed to do. And, obviously you don't want that in a finished knife, and you'll see indicators of that. But the idea is that if you never have a forge weld that is borderline, then you might be forge welding at too high of a heat, and therefore, hurting your steel. So that's something to think about. And so I'm pretty happy with that. I could maybe go just a bit hotter on my forge weld. And in fact, this particular knife came from a bigger blade that did have some D-lambs there. So overall, I could probably go just a little bit hotter on my forge weld, but not too bad overall. So this is just a quick and brutal destruction test on a little blade here to show you a little bit about what you can learn from destruction testing or testing to failure. So just to recap real fast, no knife ever is intended for the stuff we just did here. And secondly, if you're a bladesmith or a knife maker and you really want to know about your steel, about your knife design, then you are going to have to test to failure and do some crazy stuff. So, as always, thanks for watching, and we will see you on the next video.